Blake stepped off the academy bus with a quiet confidence that immediately set her apart from the chatter of her fellow cadets. Military Academy sprawled across the hillside like a fortress, its brick walls lined with ivy and its stone pathways gleaming under the morning sun. Most cadets ran in cliques, laughing, joking, or arguing, but's presence was a calm anomaly, like a stone in a river, still, unmoving, unshakable. Her bag was slung over one shoulder, containing nothing more than what she needed: a few books, her gear, and a notebook she'd use for her observations. She didn't seek attention. She didn't want it. From the first step, the stares began. Whispered comments, curious glances, and the occasional smirk followed her down the main path. Ignored them all, her eyes scanning the campus with precision, noting exits, blind spots, and the positioning of cadets along the walkways. Every detail was catalogued mentally, every possible threat assessed, even in these first, seemingly mundane minutes. It was a habit she had learned in the Navy SEAL training program, an ability to see everything and react to nothing unless necessary. The first person to approach her was a cheerful-looking cadet, a tall boy with sun-bleached hair and a lopsided grin. "Hey, you're the new girl, right?" he asked, extending his hand. Shook it briefly, her grip firm but polite, and gave only a nod. She didn't say her name right away, only observing his demeanor. He seemed harmless, eager to make friends or perhaps to size her up, she couldn't tell yet. She noted the way he shifted his weight slightly backward when a group of seniors passed nearby, subtle signs of submission and caution. "That's it," the boy said, a little disappointed. "No big story, no secret training or anything." Lips curved ever so slightly into the faintest trace of a smile. "Stories aren't necessary," she replied softly. Her voice carried calm authority without trying to command attention. The boy blinked, not used to such measured responses from someone so new. Shrugging, he walked off to join his friends, leaving alone again. She moved toward the main academy building, her steps steady and deliberate. The halls were buzzing with cadets preparing for morning drills, lockers slamming, shouts of greetings bouncing off the stone walls. Navigated effortlessly, blending into the crowd while still observing, still cataloging. A group of lounged by the stairwell, smirking as they watched her pass. She caught the glint in their eyes, the same look she had seen countless times before: judgment, curiosity, and a tiny seed of arrogance. It would come. They would test her. That was how places like this worked. Lunch was her next challenge. The cafeteria was a cacophony of noise, trays clattering against tables, conversations overlapping, laughter echoing off the walls. Found a small empty table in a corner, deliberately away from the largest groups. She unzipped her bag, took out a sandwich and a notebook, and began eating while jotting notes. Not about schoolwork, at least not exactly. She was recording cadet behaviors, knotting alliances, subtle rivalries, and the patterns of who intimidated whom. It didn't take long for the first whisper to reach her ears. "That's the new girl, she's too calm." "Yeah, she doesn't even smile, kinda creepy." Looked up just slightly, eyes scanning the table behind her. A trio of seniors were whispering, clearly sizing her up. Her lips stayed neutral, her posture relaxed, as if nothing could touch her. She didn't move to confront them, there was no need. Actions, not words, would speak here. By the end of lunch had mapped almost half the cafeteria. She knew which tables were dominated by which cliques, which cadets sought trouble, and which ones stayed silent but observant. It was all information, valuable for survival and strategy, even if it seemed excessive for someone just starting school. She was never reckless, and she never underestimated anyone. That had been drilled into her over years of combat training, long before this day. Afternoon drills introduced her to the physical demands of running, push-ups, obstacle courses, and formations, all designed to test endurance and obedience. Moved with quiet efficiency, neither flaunting her abilities nor showing strain. Others struggled beside her, some gasping, some muttering under their breath. A cadet sergeant with a reputation for intimidating newcomers noticed her immediately. Her composure unnerved him. No one stood out like this without reason, and he was determined to find it. By the time evening approached, had made minimal interaction but maximum impact. People were already whispering, "Who is she? Where does she come from? She's too calm for this place. Had achieved exactly what she wanted, awareness without attention. She didn't need friends yet. She didn't need enemies, not until they forced her hand. Later that night in her dorm room, unpacked her gear slowly. She placed her notebook on the small desk, filled with meticulous observations from her first day. Her bed was neat, her uniform pressed, every motion precise, intentional. Yet underneath that calm exterior, her mind was never idle. She reviewed what she had learned: weak cadets, dominant cadets, potential threats, and allies yet to be revealed. And as she lay down, staring at the ceiling, her thoughts lingered on and the group she had noticed watching her. They would test her. That was inevitable. She didn't fear it. In fact, she almost looked forward to it. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Wasn't just a new cadet. She was a SEAL-trained combat operative in civilian disguise and had just become her next battlefield. Her first day ended with silence, but it was the kind of silence that preceded storms. Had arrived quietly, but the calm she radiated was only the surface. Beneath it, she was calculating, preparing, and ready. Military Academy had no idea the force it had just welcomed into its walls. And tomorrow, the real test would begin. The morning sun had barely risen over Military Academy when Blake stepped onto the parade grounds. The Academy's sprawling fields, lined with perfectly trimmed hedges and flagpoles, glistened with dew. Cadets were already in formation, their boots clicking rhythmically against the stone-paved paths. Fell in line quietly, her movements precise, her posture perfect. She didn't speak unless necessary, and even then her words were measured. To anyone watching, she seemed calm, almost detached. But it wasn't detachment. Every glance, every gesture, every subtle twitch in the air or the ground beneath her was catalogued. She noted the cadets who were late, those who exchanged sly nods, the ones who lingered behind others to avoid direct scrutiny. And as always, her attention returned to the cadet sergeant who had already singled her out on the first day. Had the kind of presence that made people flinch. Tall, broad-shouldered, with piercing green eyes, he commanded attention effortlessly. And from the first moment he had seen, he had been unsettled. Not by fear, he was fearless, but by the unsettling lack of reaction. Most cadets responded to intimidation with some sign of discomfort or anger, had shown nothing. She hadn't flinched, hadn't smirked, hadn't sought attention, and worst of all, she didn't look impressed by him. Quiet one, huh? Muttered under his breath to his closest allies, a trio of equally imposing. She's hiding something. Everyone hides something. We'll find it. The three nodded, smirking. They had been here before. All new cadets eventually broke, all of them. But Blake, something about her made uneasy. Morning drills tested endurance and discipline. The cadets ran laps, performed push-ups, and crawled under low-hanging ropes. Most of the new cadets were panting, red-faced, struggling to keep up. However, moved with quiet efficiency, completing every task with ease. She didn't rush, didn't brag, didn't draw attention to herself. She simply performed, flawless in her technique, her body a machine honed for efficiency. Her calmness did not go unnoticed. Whispers spread. Did you see her run the laps? Not even out of breath. Yeah, she's too perfect. Something's off. Maybe she's from some special program. His eyes narrowed as he observed her. She's acting like she owns this place, he said, and she's not even a senior. That's dangerous. He wasn't used to being challenged silently. He had to assert dominance. That was how worked. The hierarchy was clear, and he refused to be questioned, even by a newcomer. After drills, the cadets were given a short break before afternoon combat exercises. Retreated to the courtyard, away from most groups, quietly observing interactions. She didn't need to talk to anyone to understand the social dynamics of the academy. Body language, choice of words, eye contact, small gestures, all of these were like pieces of a puzzle she could read instantly. And his group approached her during the break, pretending to be friendly. "Hey, new girl," said, leaning against a bench. "Names, you're fast, I'll give you that, but speed isn't everything here. You gotta learn respect. This place, it tests you." Tilted her head slightly, examining him. Her eyes were calm, steady, almost unreadable. "I understand rules," she replied softly. "I also understand limits." The words were innocent enough, yet the subtle undertone, a quiet authority that matched his own confidence, unsettled him further. Most cadets would have swallowed their pride, muttered a joke, or laughed nervously. Didn't. She just stood composed as if daring him to test her. Smirk returned, but it was forced. "We'll see about that," he said under his breath, stepping back with his group. He exchanged a glance with his allies, a silent agreement forming. The new girl had challenged their perception of dominance, and perception was everything. The afternoon brought combat exercises. The cadets paired off for hand-to-hand drills, grappling and simulated takedowns. Partnered with a fellow newcomer, a lanky boy named Jordan. He tried to show off, lunging aggressively. Didn't react violently. She simply stepped aside, used his momentum, and brought him to the ground with minimal force. It wasn't showy. It wasn't humiliating. It was precise. And yet, word spread almost immediately through the ranks. The new girl, she's something else. Watching from the sidelines clenched his jaw. He had to do something. If she gained respect too quickly, his authority, his carefully cultivated dominance would be questioned. And that could not happen. He waited, patient, observing. He knew the right moment would present itself. Later that evening, during a quiet inspection of personal equipment, whispered to his closest allies. "She's too calm, too perfect. We're going to find out if she's human. She'll crack." The group nodded. They had done this before. Many cadets had laughed off the first intimidation, only to break under pressure. They didn't know Blake was unlike anyone they had ever faced. Sensed the tension, though she said nothing. She wasn't concerned, not yet. She had survived far worse situations than a few cadets trying to test her limits. Her time in Navy SEAL preparatory programs had taught her one fundamental truth: observe, don't react until necessary, and always control the environment. That principle guided her as she completed the evening routines with meticulous care. Her dorm room was small, functional, and quiet. She unpacked methodically, arranging her uniform, gear, and notebook with precision. The first day had been about observation, understanding the dynamics and mapping threats, and had already noticed patterns: who laughed nervously, who avoided direct confrontation, who led and who followed. She had cataloged every detail for the day, ready to anticipate what was coming next. As she lay on her bed that night, staring at the ceiling, reflected on the day's events. She knew the seniors would test her. It was inevitable. The academy thrived on hierarchy, intimidation, and hazing. Most newcomers either bent or rebelled, and both outcomes served the system. Had no intention of bending, but she also had no desire for unnecessary conflict. She would wait. She would let them act first. And when they did, they would see exactly who they had underestimated. Somewhere in the academy, and his allies were already plotting, discussing how they would teach the new girl a lesson in humility. They didn't realize that every move they made had already been noted, every plan assessed, every weakness considered. Wasn't just a new cadet. She was a predator in plain sight, blending in until the moment she needed to strike. And tomorrow, the first real challenge would come, whether they were ready or not. Her calm was unnerving. Her silence was deadly. And in the shadows of Military Academy, a storm was quietly gathering, one that would shake the hierarchy to its core. The morning fog still clung to the academy grounds when whispers began to circulate about Blake. Cadets exchanged hushed comments, their curiosity growing alongside their frustration. The cadet sergeant, who had quickly become fixated on her, paced near the training yard with his 3 closest allies. Each step he took carried a weight of impatience and simmering pride. Calmness, her ability to remain unflustered under the subtle provocations of her peers, gnawed at him. No one had ever ignored him like this before. Most cadets, when challenged, bent immediately or retaliated with clumsy aggression. But she had done neither. Stopped and fixed his gaze on the distance, where was practicing precision footwork for the obstacle course, her movements smooth and controlled. Even in her casual practice, her body moved like a machine, graceful, calculated, precise. The other cadets could barely keep up with their own drills, yet she executed every movement flawlessly, as if she had been doing this for years. And in a place where hierarchy mattered more than skill, this performance alone made his ego bristle. "She's testing us," muttered, a frown creasing his forehead. "Or maybe she's testing me." His allies exchanged uneasy glances. None of them had been able to shake his intensity, not even the smallest bit, but had. Something about her unspoken confidence had shaken him to his core. Instinct was simple, established dominance. It had worked every time before. The problem was, he wasn't sure exactly how to proceed. After the afternoon briefing, gathered his trio of allies in the shadows behind the barracks. "All right," he said, voice low but firm. "She's too calm, too perfect. That can't be natural. Everyone has cracks. She has to have cracks. Tonight, during gear inspection, we're going to find them. I'm thinking a little friendly persuasion. You know, the kind they do to new cadets." His friends nodded. Their plan, though reckless, was nothing unusual at. Hazing newcomers with controlled physical intimidation was an unspoken tradition, and most cadets accepted it with a mixture of fear and shame. Tonight, and his allies intended to corner to show her the rules of the academy, the hierarchy she had yet to understand. They assumed it would be easy. After all, they had done it countless times. Meanwhile, his routine that afternoon was the epitome of discipline. She moved through drills, shadowed by cadets attempting to provoke reactions. Pushy comments, careless collisions, and mocking gestures were directed toward her, but she responded with neutrality. She didn't retaliate, didn't smile, didn't flinch. Every gesture was deliberate, and every pause was calculated. Those who attempted to intimidate her found themselves deflected, subtly maneuvered, or simply ignored. From her vantage point, noticed whispering to his allies, eyes fixed on her with a dangerous intensity. She didn't feel threatened, not in the conventional sense. But she understood the pattern. They were plotting something, and she was ready to let them make the first move. There was a lesson she had learned long ago. The aggressor always reveals the weaknesses of their own plan first. She simply needed to wait, observe, and prepare. The rest of the day passed with subtle psychological tension, and his allies moved with exaggerated casualness, attempting to appear nonchalant, but his awareness caught every shift of posture, every glint of mischief in their eyes. She cataloged their positions, noting escape routes, walls, equipment nearby, and even the presence of surveillance cameras, every detail a potential advantage if things escalated. By the time dinner was announced, had already mentally rehearsed dozens of possible scenarios. None of them alarmed her, all were predictable. Dinner was uneventful, though the air was thick with anticipation. The cadets whispered incessantly about his calm demeanor, some wondering if she was a martial arts prodigy or had some secret military background. Rumors swirled like wildfire. Meanwhile, was growing increasingly impatient. He needed action, a test, a moment where he could assert control. And tonight, during the supposedly routine evening gear inspection, he would get it. Evening descended with an eerie quiet. The sky was streaked with the fading glow of sunset, and the academy's hallways seemed unusually still. Returned to her dorm to organize her gear, maintaining her usual methodical precision. She arranged uniforms, polished boots, and stacked equipment with meticulous attention. Every motion was controlled, intentional. Her notebook lay open on the small desk, already filled with notes from her observations of the day. Names, tendencies, alliances, and potential threats, everything cataloged with military precision. Across the hall, and his allies prepared. They whispered, double-checked their plan, and reviewed the steps they would take to corner. Their confidence was high. After all, she was just a new cadet, a girl. They believed that to be their advantage. They did not know that the calm, collected figure they sought to intimidate was trained for situations far more dangerous than a few overly confident seniors in a military academy hallway. As the time approached for gear inspection, signaled to his allies. They moved silently down the hall, slipping past the evening shadows, positioning themselves around his dorm. From her seat, remained calm, her back straight, her eyes scanning the room. She was aware of their approach even before they made it obvious. Her breathing was slow, deliberate, as if she were meditating. Every muscle was relaxed yet ready, a combination of patience and lethal readiness born of years of combat training. The moment was set. The hallway outside's room was nearly empty. The dim glow of wall-mounted lights cast long shadows across the polished floor, made the first move pretending to casually knock on the door. Seated calmly at her desk, did not react. He stepped inside with his usual confident smirk. "Hey, new girl," he said, voice low, trying to sound friendly. "Time for your first real lesson." His allies positioned themselves around the doorway, attempting to corner her. It was a classic move, intimidation through numbers. Most cadets would have frozen, panicked, or tried to fight back blindly. Did none of these. She simply observed, noting the angle of their approach, the distance between them, and the strength of their grips. Every second she calculated her response. Reached for her, attempting the first classic intimidation, a mock choke designed to force submission without real harm. Leaned slightly, barely noticeable, adjusting her center of gravity. She remained calm, her expression neutral, almost bored. Had no idea that the move he considered minor was an error, one he would regret in moments. At that instant, his mind was entirely clear. Years of training had prepared her for unpredictability, aggression, and the chaos of sudden confrontation. She did not need to shout, flail, or panic. She simply needed to act with precision, control, and authority. The seniors believed they were hunting, knew they were about to be caught in a trap of their own making. And in the quiet tension of the hallway, the first seeds of confrontation were planted. The night had arrived, and with it, the first true test of skill, patience, and resolve. Was ready. The cadets were not. The hallway outside Blake's dorm stretched long and dim under the soft glow of the wall lights. Shadows elongated across the polished stone floors, creating strange patterns that seemed to dance with every flicker. The academy had settled into a quiet lull typical of late evenings. A few cadets hurried to showers, some whispered in distant corners, and the last stragglers of study groups packed up their notes. To anyone watching, the hall seemed harmless, ordinary, but tonight, danger waited in plain sight. Leaned against the wall, his trio of allies closed behind, hearts pumping with anticipation. The plan had been simple: corner, assert dominance, and show her that no one hierarchy without consequences. Smirk had grown over the day as he imagined the look on her face when she finally realized she couldn't escape. After all, she was just a new girl, he reminded himself. Was seated calmly at her desk, reviewing her notes and silently observing the hallway. Every shadow, every approaching footstep, every shift in the distant light was recorded in her mind. Years of Navy SEAL combat training had conditioned her to detect threats before they fully manifested. And though she appeared serene, her body was coiled with controlled readiness, muscles relaxed but prepared to react instantly. Stepped closer, his hand brushing the doorframe casually. "Hey, new girl," he said, voice low, attempting a friendly yet authoritative tone. "Time for your first real lesson." His allies positioned themselves strategically, blocking potential escape routes. Their combined presence created a triangle of intimidation, and to them it looked perfect. Didn't flinch. She didn't speak. She simply shifted her eyes, taking in distances, angles, and pressure points with silent precision. When lunged forward with a choke attempt, aiming to intimidate without causing permanent harm, his body reacted with a fluidity that seemed almost superhuman. The first move was sloppy, just as she had anticipated. His hand slipped around her neck, tight enough to scare, not tight enough to actually harm. Most cadets would have panicked instantly but leaned slightly forward, adjusting her center of gravity and using his momentum against him. In a motion almost imperceptible, she shifted her arm, broke his balance, and sent him stumbling forward into the polished floor. Shock registered across face. His grip had failed, and he had not anticipated resistance that precise. Before he could react, had already moved to intercept the next threat. Her SEAL training allowed her to neutralize opponents efficiently and safely. She targeted key pressure points and leveraged joint control techniques to bring the first ally down without harming him permanently. The hallway erupted into chaos as the other two rushed toward her. Remained calm, eyes scanning for openings. Her hands moved with lethal precision, striking, twisting, and sweeping in perfect rhythm. One cadet reached for her shoulders. She rotated, twisting his wrist sharply, sending him crashing into the wall. Another attempted to flank her. She adjusted stance, pivoted, and delivered a controlled sweep that left him on the floor, groaning and disoriented. Never lost control. Each move was calculated, each strike deliberate. She didn't shout. She didn't rage. She simply neutralized threats with the quiet, devastating efficiency of someone who had trained for situations far more dangerous than this. And all the while, watched in disbelief, struggling to comprehend how the girl he had intended to intimidate had reduced his entire group to a stunned heap within seconds. By now, word had begun to spread through the corridors. A few cadets who had been passing by peeked from the corners, their mouths open in shock. Whispers grew louder. "The new girl, she's not human. What is she doing? She moves like she's military trained." Some ran for cover, unwilling to intervene, while others stood frozen, mesmerized by the precision of her movements. His breathing remained steady, controlled, almost meditative. She checked her surroundings constantly, ensuring that each move left her with an advantage. None of the cadets were permanently injured. She had intentionally avoided unnecessary harm. Her objective was not revenge or humiliation, but efficiency and self-defense. And in this, she excelled beyond anyone's expectations. Finally found his voice, a strained mix of disbelief and fear. "Stop, stop. You don't understand." His words were cut off as intercepted him, her hand pressing lightly on his chest, not enough to harm but enough to assert control. "I understand perfectly," she said softly. "You just chose the wrong person to test." The hall fell silent except for the groans of the disoriented cadets on the floor. The echo of the encounter lingered like a thunderclap. His allies slowly picked themselves up, shame and confusion written across their faces. No one spoke. No one dared move. The lesson had been delivered in a way words could never convey. From that moment on, the dynamics of military academy shifted subtly but irrevocably, had revealed without intent that she was not a cadet to be trifled with. Her calmness, previously mistaken for meekness or detachment, was now a badge of power, a demonstration of competence few could challenge. The rumor mill began churning even faster. "Did you see her? She's like a seal or something." 5 seniors on the floor in less than a minute. Straightened, adjusting her uniform and returning to her desk as if nothing had happened. She didn't revel in her efficiency. She didn't mock the cadets she had subdued. She simply returned to her routine, calm and composed, as though neutralizing threats was the most natural thing in the world. To the watching cadets, she was a force of nature, silent, unstoppable, and terrifyingly controlled. By the time the academy staff arrived after reports of the disturbance, the scene had already settled. The cadets were groaning, sprawled across the floor, whispering frantic explanations. His pride had been shattered, replaced with a simmering mixture of fear and respect. Had not bragged, had not drawn attention to herself, but her actions had spoken volumes. The commandant and several officers quickly assessed the situation. While some cadets expected punishment for sufficiency, the reality was different. The officers recognized her extraordinary skill, her precision, and most importantly, her restraint. She had defended herself without causing serious harm, demonstrating an understanding of discipline and control beyond her apparent rank. Later that night, as returned to her dorm room, she reflected on the encounter. It had been exactly as she had anticipated. The seniors' arrogance and misjudgment had led them straight into her calculated response. She hadn't sought conflict, but she had met it with precision. The academy had tested her, and she had responded accordingly. The incident would not be forgotten. Word of Blake's capabilities spread like wildfire through the academy. Whispers in corridors, cautious glances, and newfound respect became the new norm. Even, despite his bruised ego, realized that the girl he had tried to intimidate was no ordinary cadet. She was something far more dangerous, controlled, and skilled. and in the shadows of Military Academy understood one thing. The first confrontation had ended, but this was only the beginning. Others would inevitably test her, but they would all learn the same lesson: underestimate Blake at your own peril. The quiet storm of her presence had been unleashed. The academy would never see her the same way again. The echoes of the hallway confrontation still lingered in the corridors of Military Academy. Word had already traveled faster than any official announcement could manage. Cadets whispered in corners, some in awe, others in disbelief. The image of Blake standing calmly while 5 groaned on the floor had spread like wildfire. She hadn't yelled, hadn't boasted, and yet her presence was now unmistakable, a quiet storm that no one dared ignore. However, did not allow herself any pride. Her training had taught her that overconfidence was the first path to failure. She moved through the halls with the same composed precision as before, observing, cataloging, calculating. Every glance she cast, every footstep she took, revealed nothing, yet absorbed everything. She noticed the hesitant nods, the glances of fear-tinged admiration, and the whispered conversations that trailed behind her like shadows. These subtle cues were all part of understanding the environment, part of survival. However, was not so calm. The humiliation of being outmaneuvered and overpowered by a newcomer burned in his chest like fire. He had always been the authority in every room he entered, the cadet whose command was unquestioned. And yet here he was, nursing bruised ego and a growing wariness of someone he had deemed beneath him. His pride demanded retribution, or at least an explanation. He cornered a few cadets near the training yard and muttered, "She's not normal. No one moves like that. I need to figure her out." The next day, his routine resumed, but the energy was palpably different. Cadets who had once ignored now gave her subtle, respectful space. Others were careful not to provoke her in conversation or drills. Even the instructors, who usually focused only on performance metrics, had noticed something unusual in the new cadet's technique and composure. The afternoon brought scheduled combat drills in the academy's gymnasium. Normally, these sessions were exercises in endurance and coordination, with a touch of controlled aggression. Today, however, the atmosphere was tense. Watched with curiosity, their whispers punctuated by occasional gasps when they recalled yesterday's hallway incident. Paired with Jordan, the lanky newcomer she had partnered with before, he still attempted to show off, throwing exaggerated punches, testing grips and pushing her to respond. But his movements were fluid, effortless, and controlled. Every motion was precise, turning, slipping, twisting, and redirecting force without losing balance or composure. Jordan found himself thrown gently but decisively, landing on the mat with a stunned look, unable to comprehend how effortless her response had been. His demonstration drew a crowd. Cadets who had previously dismissed her now stopped to watch, some whispering about technique, others quietly in awe, lurking on the sidelines, observed silently. His pride was still bruised, but his curiosity was growing. This was not brute strength or luck. This was skill, discipline, and training at a level far beyond anything they had expected from a newcomer. The drills escalated to free-form sparring, and his true mastery became apparent. Every opponent was met with a combination of observation and reflexive response. She anticipated attacks almost before they began, using minimal energy to control maximum outcome. Pressure points, joint manipulations, controlled sweeps, and redirection of force, all executed with surgical precision. Every cadet who challenged her found themselves off balance, outmatched, and silently impressed. His frustration grew, tempered by begrudging respect. He had been trained to dominate, to control, to intimidate. But here was someone who moved through challenges with absolute control, neutralizing threat without cruelty. He realized slowly that strength lay not in aggression but in restraint, in knowing exactly when and how to act. Later was summoned to the commandant's office. The room was dimly lit, the heavy air filled with anticipation. The commandant, a stern but fair woman named Colonel, regarded her with curiosity. She began, "I've been reviewing the reports of yesterday's incident. I want to understand what happened from your perspective." Explained briefly, her words calm, neutral, and precise. She described the confrontation, emphasizing her intent to defend herself while avoiding serious harm. She did not boast. She did not exaggerate. Her account was factual, measured, and unflinching. The commandant listened, occasionally nodding, her expression inscrutable. When finished, the silence lingered. "You have extraordinary skill," Colonel finally said, her voice steady. "It's rare to see such composure under pressure. Most cadets would have panicked. You did not. But this is a civilian academy, not a battlefield. Your skills, while impressive, must be adapted to these standards. Do you understand?" Nodded. "Yes, ma'am, I understand. My intent was only to neutralize threat, not to escalate it." The commandant studied her for a moment longer, then leaned back. "Very well. I want you to work with our cadets in controlled drills. Teach them discipline, technique, and restraint. Can benefit from your expertise, but you will adhere strictly to academy protocol." His mind processed the offer. This was unexpected, yet it aligned perfectly with her approach. She could teach, guide, and shape without unnecessary conflict. "I will comply," she replied. Word of the commandant's decision spread quickly. Cadets who had once mocked or ignored her now approached with tentative respect. Even, hesitant but curious, lingered nearby during training sessions, observing her techniques. He struggled to reconcile his bruised ego with the undeniable truth. Blake was extraordinary, and she had the power to redefine the dynamics of the academy. Over the next few days began informal training sessions with smaller groups. She demonstrated restraint-based techniques, teaching cadets how to defend themselves efficiently, control aggressive opponents, and maintain composure under pressure. Her approach was methodical. Every lesson focused on skill development rather than humiliation. Slowly, the culture of intimidation began to shift. Cadets realized that mastery of skill, not brute strength or fear, commanded respect. Watched all of this with a mixture of awe and frustration. He had entered the academy confident in his dominance, only to discover a new reality, one in which intimidation was ineffective against someone like. And yet, he could not deny that her methods were effective. Some part of him, buried beneath ego and pride, wanted to learn, to adapt, and perhaps, eventually, to respect her. Even the cadets who had attempted to intimidate her initially were now cautious. They approached her only when necessary, observing her movements and occasionally asking for advice. Responded without malice, teaching with patience but requiring discipline. Those who resisted, who tried to test her again, found themselves swiftly but safely corrected, reinforcing the lesson that control and skill were superior to impulsive aggression. By the end of the week, the academy's atmosphere had begun to change. Whispers of fear had transformed into murmurs of respect. Cadets moved with greater awareness, performed drills with more focus, and approached confrontations with caution rather than arrogance. His presence, once underestimated, had become a stabilizing force. She had demonstrated that strength without control was meaningless, and that calm determination could command respect more effectively than any display of power. Herself remained calm, never seeking recognition or glory. She understood that true mastery lay in restraint, discipline, and anticipation. The cadets who had underestimated her learned that lesson the hard way, and observing silently, began the slow process of adjusting his own ego to accept a new hierarchy, one in which skill and composure mattered more than intimidation or seniority. As night fell over, reflected on the week. She had defended herself, neutralized threats, and begun shaping the cadets' skills. But she also knew that this was only the beginning. Her presence had altered the academy's balance of power, and while some would eventually embrace her lessons, others would inevitably test her again. She was prepared. Every step, every breath, and every calculated movement was a part of a larger strategy, a strategy built on precision, control, and the unwavering knowledge that those who underestimate her do so at their own peril. In the quiet of her dorm, she organized her gear, reviewed the day's events, and made notes for the next training sessions. The academy had witnessed her first demonstration of true skill, and the ripples of her presence would continue to spread. Blake was no ordinary cadet. She was a force, measured and unstoppable, and the students were only beginning to understand the magnitude of what had arrived among them. By the start of the following week, Military Academy had transformed. The once bustling hallways now hummed with a mix of curiosity and caution. Every cadet who had witnessed Blake's calm dismantling of or had merely heard whispers, moved differently. Even casual interactions carried an undercurrent of unease. Those who had tried to intimidate her avoided her gaze, while others observed silently from a distance, their expressions a mixture of awe and disbelief. The ripple effect of the previous week's events could not be overstated. Once the unquestioned leader among the senior cadets was now a shadow of his former confident self. He walked the halls with a stiff posture, eyes flicking toward occasionally, a flicker of grudging respect in his green gaze. Pride still lingered, but it was tempered by the undeniable fact that she had outmaneuvered him completely, without even raising her voice. He had never encountered anyone like her, and the realization gnawed at him relentlessly. Rumors had already spread far beyond those who had witnessed the hallway incident firsthand. Cadets who had only caught snippets of conversation between and his allies were telling their friends that was trained in a secret military program, or that she was some kind of covert operative. Others, less imaginative but equally nervous, speculated that she might have elite martial arts training. Some even whispered that she could be affiliated with Navy SEALs. The academy, always ripe for gossip, buzzed with half-truths and exaggerations, none of which diminished the growing aura of legend surrounding. Herself remained unbothered. She moved through the academy with the same calm precision as ever, observing without reacting unnecessarily. She didn't correct the rumors. She had learned long ago that perception was as powerful as reality. If people believed she was extraordinary, they would act more cautiously around her, and that caution, in turn, ensured safety. She had no desire for fame or notoriety. Her objective had always been simple: maintain control and ensure that aggression was met with consequence. During combat drills that afternoon, instructors noticed the change in cadet behavior. Where once there had been brashness and overconfidence, now there was restraint. Cadets approached challenges more thoughtfully, and skirmishes were more controlled. Partnered with several new recruits, demonstrating techniques that combined efficiency with control. She emphasized observation, patience, and precise movement. Every exercise was a lesson in discipline rather than force, and the cadets who trained with her learned faster than ever before. Watching from the sidelines, struggled to reconcile his bruised ego with what he observed. He had always measured himself by dominance and intimidation, yet here was someone who commanded respect simply by being composed and skilled. His pride bristled, but he couldn't deny the results. Some part of him, buried beneath layers of ego, wanted to learn from her, to adapt his own approach, to gain insight into the methods that had so decisively neutralized him and his allies. Word reached Colonel, the commandant, who had been monitoring progress closely. She called her to the office once more, a gesture that carried both curiosity and caution. The room was dimly lit, the air carrying the faint scent of polished wood and leather. Colonel regarded carefully, her sharp eyes measuring every nuance of her demeanor. "I have received reports of your influence on the cadets," she began. "It seems your presence alone has altered behavior for better or worse." Responded calmly, her voice measured. "My intent has always been to maintain order and ensure safety. I am simply demonstrating how discipline and skill prevent unnecessary conflict." Colonel leaned back, steepling her fingers. "It is impressive. Your training and control are beyond what we usually expect from a cadet, but there is more than just skill at play here. You command attention without demanding it, and that is rare, very rare." She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You understand the implications of your abilities, don't you? Many here are inexperienced, prone to mistakes, and some will inevitably try to test you again." Nodded. "I understand. I am prepared to respond if necessary, but my goal is not to dominate. It is to guide, to demonstrate, and to prevent unnecessary harm. Colonel studied her silently for a moment longer, then gave a faint nod. Very well. I want you to continue assisting with cadet training under supervision, but I also expect discretion. Your methods are effective, but is not a battlefield. We cannot allow fear to replace education. Left the office without further comment, her expression as calm and composed as ever. She returned to the training yard where cadets were waiting, some eager to learn, others cautiously curious. Lingered at the edge of the group, a silent observer, unsure whether to approach or retreat. He knew he could not confront her without risk, yet he wanted to understand her methods. During the afternoon session, demonstrated a series of controlled defense techniques. She showed cadets how to anticipate attacks, redirect force, and maintain balance and composure under pressure. Her movements were fluid, almost hypnotic in their precision. Every cadet who participated found themselves challenged in ways they had never expected, yet the lessons were constructive. No one was humiliated. No one was injured unnecessarily. The result was skill building, not fear. Observers were captivated. Even cadets who had previously dismissed her as quiet or meek now approached cautiously, eager to learn yet wary of provoking her. Despite his pride, took detailed mental notes. He recognized that his ability to neutralize aggression without escalation was a skill he had never mastered, and one that could reshape the hierarchy of itself. By evening, the Academy's perception of had shifted significantly. She was no longer just a new cadet. She was a figure of authority, skill, and quiet power. Cadets whispered her name with a mixture of respect and caution. Those who had once attempted to intimidate her now avoided confrontation altogether. Still grappling with pride and curiosity, found himself reconsidering his own methods and leadership style. Later in the dormitory, reviewed her notes from the week. She cataloged every observation, every interaction, and every subtle sign of aggression or respect. She had begun to map the social dynamics of the Academy with the same precision she applied to combat drills. Her presence was altering the balance of power, and she understood that maintaining control required vigilance, patience, and strategy. Even as the night deepened, reflected on the transformation she had initiated. She had defended herself, demonstrated skill, and begun shaping the cadets' understanding of discipline and respect. But she knew this was only the beginning. Others would inevitably test her. Some would do so out of fear, others out of pride, and some simply out of curiosity. She was ready for all of them. Rumors of her Navy SEAL-level skill began to circulate more openly, fueled by whispers, speculation, and observation. Cadets speculated wildly. Some claimed she had secret military programs. Others suggested covert training with elite operatives. No one could confirm the truth, yet the legend grew. And allowed it, perception was as powerful as reality, and the more the cadets believed in her extraordinary abilities, the more controlled the Academy became. By the end of the night, Military Academy had a new dynamic. Respect, caution, and subtle awe now permeated the halls. Blake, through skill, restraint, and presence, had established herself as a force to be reckoned with. Even despite bruised ego and lingering resentment, recognized the undeniable fact. She was no ordinary cadet. She was exceptional, disciplined, and quietly unstoppable. And somewhere deep inside, knew that this was just the start. The true tests, the challenges that would push her skills and patience to their limits had yet to come. But she was prepared. Every lesson she had learned in training, every encounter she had faced in past missions, had brought her to this point. And Military Academy, whether it realized it or not, was about to become her proving ground. By the middle of the semester, Military Academy had transformed in ways no one had anticipated. The legend of Blake had spread far beyond her immediate circle. Cadets whispered about her in hushed tones in dormitories, dining halls, and training yards. Even who had once dominated the Academy through intimidation approached her with a cautious respect. Her mere presence had shifted the culture of the Academy. It was no longer enough to rely on brute strength or hierarchy. Discipline, control, and skill now commanded authority. moved through the campus with the same calm, composed demeanor that had initially unsettled and his allies. Yet beneath the surface, she was constantly observing. Every cadet, every shift in posture, every word exchanged became part of her mental map of. She cataloged alliances, subtle rivalries, and unspoken social hierarchies. Her ability to anticipate aggression was unmatched, and even casual cadet interactions became predictable under her keen observation. Meanwhile had begun a quiet transformation of his own. His pride still lingered, but the bruising lessons of the hallway confrontation and subsequent training sessions forced him to reconsider his approach. He observed methods closely, noting how she commanded respect without fear, neutralized challenges without humiliation, and cultivated loyalty rather than obedience. Slowly, he began to adopt some of these principles in his leadership style, though with his own limitations and reluctance. The day's training session began with cadets running the obstacle course, led a small group of cadets, demonstrating not just efficiency, but how to approach each challenge with mental focus and calm awareness. She emphasized observation, noting that anticipating obstacles was often more critical than raw speed. Cadets followed her instructions carefully, their respect evident in their attentive movements. For the first time, even the most overconfident paused to observe before acting, wary of making mistakes in her presence. After the obstacle course, the cadets moved into hand-to-hand combat drills, paired with various cadets, demonstrating techniques that combined SEAL-level efficiency with control appropriate to the Academy's rules. She emphasized using an opponent's momentum against them, neutralizing threats without inflicting unnecessary harm, and maintaining situational awareness at all times. Each demonstration left the cadets in awe, many whispering among themselves about her extraordinary skill and composure. Watched silently from the sidelines, his mind racing. He had spent years mastering physical dominance but had taught him a different kind of authority, one rooted in skill, observation, and psychological insight. Her methods were not aggressive. They were precise, calculated, and effective. Slowly, he realized that true leadership was about influence, not intimidation, and that control could be maintained without fear. After training, returned to her dorm to review notes and plan future sessions. She was methodical in her approach, cataloging cadet responses, noting strengths, weaknesses, and potential challenges. Her SEAL background had trained her to anticipate threats, adapt to dynamic situations, and maintain composure under extreme pressure. Hereat, she applied the same principles, though in a controlled academic setting rather than a combat zone. Rumors about her background continued to swirl. Some cadets claimed she had served in special operations, others speculated about elite martial arts training. The truth, known only to a select few, added to the aura of her presence. Allowed the rumors to flourish quietly, the mystique ensured that cadets approached her with caution, respect, and a willingness to learn. She had learned early in her career that perception was a powerful tool, often more influential than brute strength. One evening, the commandant colonel summoned once again. The office was quiet, the soft glow of desk lamps illuminating her composed face. The colonel began, "Your influence on the cadets is unprecedented. They respect you, fear you, and yet follow your guidance. It's a delicate balance. How do you maintain such control?" Responded calmly, "Discipline, observation, and respect, ma'am. I treat every interaction as an opportunity to guide, not dominate. Cadets respond when they feel understood rather than coerced. Aggression only leads to resistance. Control comes from skill and composure, not intimidation." Colonel nodded thoughtfully. "I see. Very well. I want you to continue assisting with training but also begin mentoring cadets for leadership roles. Your methods could redefine the future of." Understood immediately. Her influence would no longer be limited to combat techniques. She would shape the culture, instill discipline, and cultivate leaders capable of maintaining authority without fear. This was a new mission, one that required patience, insight, and strategic guidance. In the following weeks, his presence became a stabilizing force at Cadets who had once sought confrontation now approached her for guidance. Though initially hesitant, began seeking advice on how to manage his team more effectively. He observed her methods carefully, gradually internalizing principles of control, observation, and influence. Slowly, he began to respect her not just as a cadet, but as a mentor of sorts, a realization that did not come easily to him. Meanwhile, continued to lead small training groups, demonstrating techniques, emphasizing strategy, and teaching cadets how to maintain composure under pressure. She encouraged observation, patience, and calculated responses, reinforcing lessons learned during her hallway confrontation. Cadets who had once underestimated her were now among her most attentive pupils, eager to absorb her insights and avoid mistakes. One afternoon, during an advanced simulation exercise paired with, the scenario required anticipating and responding to dynamic challenges while maintaining control over simulated threats. Approached with confidence, expecting to assert dominance as usual, but moved with fluid precision, countering his advances with calm, controlled responses. Every move was calculated, every reaction deliberate. Faltered as he had many times before. Yet this time, he observed her techniques closely, analyzing her approach rather than reacting impulsively. Slowly, he began to understand the depth of her skill, the subtlety of her influence, and the strength of her composed authority. For the first time, he realized that leadership was not about physical dominance or fear. It was about presence, discipline, and guidance. By evening, the academy had fully absorbed the reality of Blake. Cadets approached challenges with caution, respected her authority, and even those who had once mocked her now sought her guidance. Her presence had reshaped the social dynamics of, instilling discipline, focus, and strategic thinking across the student body. Reflecting on the week's events, understood that her mission had evolved. She had arrived as a newcomer, tested by the academy's hierarchy, and proven herself in combat and discipline. But her role now extended beyond personal skill. She was shaping the culture, mentoring future leaders, and ensuring that control and composure would define authority at. As night fell, reviewed her notes once more. She cataloged observations, recorded lessons learned, and planned future sessions. Her SEAL-level training had taught her that preparation, observation, and adaptability were critical to success. She applied these principles not to survive, but to cultivate skill, respect, and strategic leadership among cadets. In the quiet of her dorm, realized the magnitude of her influence. She had transformed the academy, reshaped perceptions, and begun building a legacy. Yet she knew this was only the beginning. Challenges would continue, rivalries would emerge, and tests of skill and composure were inevitable. But was ready. Every move, every observation, every lesson had been deliberate. Military Academy would never be the same, and neither would the cadets who had witnessed her rise. The following morning, Military Academy was alive with anticipation. Word had spread of Blake's latest training sessions, and cadets moved with cautious respect in the hallways. The subtle shift in the academy's atmosphere was undeniable. Where arrogance and aggression had once ruled, now there was observation, discipline, and careful calculation. The legend of Blake had reached its zenith. She was no longer just a newcomer or a cadet to be tested. She was a force, a model of skill and composure. Once the unquestioned alpha among the moved through the hallways with an unusual humility. He had spent weeks observing, analyzing her movements, and reflecting on her methods. He had begun adopting her approach, tempering impulsive aggression with patience and calculated responses. Pride still lingered, but respect had grown, an acknowledgement of the exceptional skill and presence that exuded. The day's training schedule was unlike any other. Colonel had organized a series of advanced exercises designed to test both leadership and skill under pressure. Had been given a central role, not just to participate, but to guide and mentor her fellow cadets. The exercises were designed to simulate high-stakes scenarios, rapid decision-making, teamwork, strategic thinking, and controlled combat situations. Every cadet present felt the weight of her observation. knowing that missteps could be immediately noted and corrected. Began the session by addressing the cadets. Her voice, calm and precise, carried authority without arrogance. "Today," she said, "we will focus not on strength but on control. Observe, anticipate, respond. Discipline is the greatest weapon you possess." Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of experience and certainty. Cadets leaned in, absorbing her instructions, aware that every lesson she imparted was forged from real-world experience beyond the academy's walls. The exercises began. Teams moved through obstacle courses, simulated combat drills and leadership challenges. Moved among them, correcting stances, demonstrating techniques, and ensuring that cadets applied control and strategy rather than relying on brute force. Each correction was precise, each demonstration flawless. Cadets who had once underestimated her were now attentive pupils, eager to learn from the unmatched expertise she offered. Found himself paired with for a critical exercise. The scenario required rapid decision-making under simulated threat. He approached with his usual confidence, ready to assert control, but anticipated every move he made. She countered with fluid precision, guiding him through the correct approach without overtly dominating the exercise. For the first time, experienced the power of mentorship over aggression. He realized that leadership could be enforced through influence and skill rather than fear, and that respect was earned through mastery, not intimidation. By mid-afternoon, the drills escalated into a full-scale simulation. Cadets were tasked with navigating complex environments, responding to unexpected challenges, and coordinating as a unit under pressure. His presence was the stabilizing force. She moved fluidly, observing not just individual performance but group dynamics. When errors occurred, she corrected swiftly, demonstrating both authority and precision. Her SEAL-level reflexes allowed her to anticipate issues before they escalated, turning potential chaos into controlled learning moments. Observers, including Colonel, noted the extraordinary shift in cadet behavior. Where previously there had been hesitation, arrogance, or impulsive aggression, now there was careful calculation, disciplined execution, and silent acknowledgement of authority. The cadets were transforming, not because of fear, but because they understood the value of skill, patience, and composure. Had achieved what few instructors ever could. She had altered the culture of the academy from within. The final phase of the exercise brought the most intense challenge. Cadets faced a simulated high-threat scenario with multiple variables and potential hazards. Teams had to coordinate, anticipate threats, and respond strategically. Paired with and several other, moved with silent authority. Every action she took was deliberate, positioning herself to support her team, intercepting errors before they became problems, and ensuring that responses remained controlled and effective. Applying lessons learned under his guidance, acted differently than he ever had before. He observed, anticipated, and responded with patience rather than. He realized fully and finally the depth of her influence. Respect replaced resentment, admiration replaced frustration. He saw clearly that she was not only exceptional in skill but transformative in leadership. For the first time, he understood what true mastery meant. Command through control, authority through composure, influence through discipline. By the conclusion of the simulation, every cadet present had been tested and corrected. His presence had ensured that no one was humiliated unnecessarily, yet everyone had learned critical lessons about skill, anticipation, and composure. The hallways echoed with whispers of awe. The who had once relied solely on hierarchy and intimidation now sought guidance. The younger cadets who had once feared conflict now observed carefully, eager to emulate discipline and control. Colonel gathered the cadets for a final briefing. Her voice was measured, her eyes sharp. "Today, we witnessed not just skill, but leadership," she said. "Blake has shown that mastery of self and discipline in action creates authority greater than fear or aggression. You have all learned, whether consciously or not, that respect is earned through competence, control, and composure. Let this be a lesson you carry forward." Cadets exchanged glances, the weight of the day's exercises settling in. Approached after the briefing, extending a hand, a gesture of acknowledgement and respect. "You've changed how I see this place and myself," he said quietly. I respect you, more than I thought I could." Accepted the handshake with calm composure. "Respect is earned, not given," she replied. "I hope you continue to lead with skill and discipline." Nodded, silently acknowledging that her guidance had reshaped his understanding of authority and leadership. That evening, as the academy settled into quiet, reflected on the transformation she had initiated. She had arrived as a new cadet, underestimated and tested, yet she had proven herself not only in combat skill, but in the ability to guide, influence, and reshape the culture of military academy. She had neutralized threats with precision, instructed with patience, and commanded respect without intimidation. Rumors about her SEAL-level training had now into a legend that extended beyond the academy walls. New cadets arriving in subsequent weeks would hear whispers of her extraordinary skill, her composure under pressure, and the lessons she had imparted. Blake had become more than a cadet. She had become a symbol of discipline, authority, and excellence. In her dormitory, cataloged the week's events, making careful notes on cadet performance, social dynamics, and potential future challenges. She knew that leadership was an ongoing exercise, one that required observation, adaptability, and patience. But she also knew that she had achieved something rare. She had instilled respect without fear, influence without coercion, and mastery without arrogance. As night deepened, Military Academy lay quiet under the stars. The cadets had been transformed by experience, by observation, and by the presence of someone who embodied the ideals they aspired to. Like many others, reflected on the lessons he had learned, understanding that true authority was not about dominance but discipline, respect, and composure. Lying in her bed and reviewing her notes, smiled faintly. The academy had been tested, and so had she. The challenges she faced had been real, the threats immediate, and the lessons hard-earned. Yet she had prevailed, not through aggression, but through control, strategy, and quiet mastery. Would never forget her arrival, and the legacy she was building would endure far beyond her time there. In the weeks and months that followed, the story of Blake spread throughout the academy. Cadets learned from her example, adapted their approach, and instructors recognized the transformative power of her methods. Her influence became embedded in the culture of skill and discipline were prioritized over arrogance, composure and strategy over impulsive action. Blake had arrived as a newcomer, tested by cadets who underestimated her. She had faced intimidation, neutralized threats, and taught lessons that extended beyond combat. By the end of her first semester, she had reshaped the academy itself. Her presence was no longer merely a personal attribute. It was a catalyst for lasting change, a symbol of what discipline, skill, and calm authority could achieve. And as the academy slept under the quiet glow of the evening lights, knew one truth with absolute clarity. She had arrived to teach, to defend, and to lead, and Military Academy would never be the same again.